Hi, witches. You are down with me, Anarchy, and you're probably aware that I have a very special treat for you this time. Although nobody really watched my little 2-minute teaser. Hurt my feelings. Made me cry just a little. I wept gently and cradled myself in the fetal position. At any rate, you probably saw the meme of the giant saying, "It's happening again," and kind of pieced it together. You probably didn't need more context clues than that, did you? Because you're smart people and you're beautiful witches. I'm so happy that you're here. We are actually going to talk about, okay, which one? There's still an element of surprise. I'm actually starting with Fire Walk with Me, which I know is a somewhat controversial and very interesting place to start. It actually was not my intention. Here's what had happened was, I actually wanted to start with the series, and I wanted to start with the pilot because the pilot is so beautifully filmed. It makes me nostalgic for that area, for the falls and the whole thing and the double R. And I watched the pilot, and it's so strange to me, but I shit you not, go back and watch it. There is not a single instance of magic in the entire pilot. In the original version. Now, in the international version, of course, they slapped together that whole weird thing with Bob doing the satanic kind of ritual, and is he in the basement of the hospital or something bizarre? In the pilot, there is one scene where the one-armed man gets off the elevator in front of Cooper and Truman, and it's totally unexplained. It's just a nod to him. I think in the international version, that is the place where he goes down to the basement because he's trying to stop Bob. At any rate, I thought, okay, that doesn't really work. So I went to episode 1, and there's still not much magic. In episode 1, they introduced the concept of the secret society, the Bookhouse Boys, but other than that, there's not a lot of magic. And I thought, man, that was really fucking brilliant. Because, I've wondered over the years, like, how was he able to get that on network television? And then really, because whenever I hear the Twin Peaks theme and I'm automatically transported to a land of magic and just surrealism, and it's, a whole voyage for me. I know where it's going. So it's hard to imagine it as a first-time watcher in the 90s. But I think including the pilot, the first 2 or 3 episodes, he really just played it off as a straight up murder mystery, which is pretty genius. But what else would we expect? Sorry about that. My dog decided to vomit on my carpet. I just want to point out that I have hardwood floors. So she made a special effort to go to the one area rug where, anyway, animals, they bring us joy, but wow, at what cost? There's a lot of vomit. There's a lot of vomit and poop in my life. Anyway, so Lynch bamboozled the network. Ta-da, history was made. What I will say is, controversial. I mentioned why. Okay, so this is pretty obvious too, but in case you're not a total Twin Peaks enthusiast, I will explain this to you. The series aired first. The Fire Walk with Me, the prequel, was made years later, a couple years after the end of the second season. So why a prequel, and why, what was his thinking on that? That I cannot elucidate anything. I'm not arrogant enough to pretend I know what's going on in Lynch's mind. But what I will say is, what people didn't like about it was that it didn't have all the same actors, which seems like a really kind of petty complaint, but also that it is, in the words of many actors and actresses, it goes too far, that star in the series, sorry, such as Kyle MacLachlan himself says this. It goes too far. It's too violent, and it's too much, and it loses the juxtaposition of that small town charm where things are a little offbeat, and it's just brutal. It's brutality. It's brutality. What I said the first time I watched this movie, the very first time I watched it, was, well, yeah, of course it was brutal. It was Laura's story. This is a story of a teenage girl who's spiraling out of fucking control because her father has been molesting her since she was 11 years old. I mean, she's on drugs, she's losing it, she's spiraling. Her world was necessarily dark, and testament to Sheryl Lee. Like in the series, the first run of, you know, season 1, season 2, we actually don't get to see a lot of her as Laura Palmer. And man, she's so good. She's so fucking amazing in this. She sells it to me 100%. And the trust that Ray Weiss and Sheryl Lee must have had together as father and daughter must have been really incredible. And in fact, I think Sheryl Lee does talk about that. But where I'm getting a lot of this information about the actors thinking that had gone too far is from, if you own the DVD like I do, there's a documentary, which I'm using this loosely here. It's more a collection of the actors and directors and people involved in the project. It's clips of them saying things kind of out of context. It's of course you watch it every time you watch Fire Walk with Me, because that's just what we do. But I can't remember who says it. It's somebody I don't know. It's somebody who's sitting with little Mike. He says, yeah, it's dark, it's brutal, it's Laura's story. I'm like, okay, so I'm not the only other person who caught that. Even so, some people think that Fire Walk with Me creates more questions than were originally posed in the series, and that's true. But what's really fucking cool and interesting about that is those questions have been answered over the years throughout the missing pieces, the secret history of Twin Peaks, and most notably in The Return. All of those loose ends are tied up, y'all. Almost every single one. So I think that's super fascinating. Another thing about Fire Walk with Me that people didn't like was some of the imagery and stuff that he uses, like the angel was a really big one. And I'm going to get to that. I'm actually going to do the angel who saves, saves Renette Polanski, but not Sheryl Lee. I know a couple of people who had big problems with that imagery. I'm going to address that when I get to that scene. I'm going to do not quite a scene by scene because it's a like 2-hour movie, but I'm gonna analyze it pretty close to scene by scene, play by play, because there's so much in this movie that I can't give like a really quick synopsis and be done with it. It's David Lynch. That's why I wanted to take some time with this episode. So I took a week off so I could really rewatch it, take some notes, and do the whole thing up. With that said, other controversies, the silliest one, who's the better Donna, Moira or Laura Flynn Boyle? It's hard because they play essentially two very different characters. Their takes on Laura or on Donna are so different. Admittedly, I am a Moira girl, and it's really just for the chug-a-lug Donna. No, that's not it. It was the chug-a-lug Donna in the beginning, but I will say, in the pilot and the first episode, Laura Flynn Boyle does a fucking amazing job. That scene in the classroom when she looks at James and realizes that it's Laura who's missing or injured or dead is really brilliant. After that, I find she becomes a little whiny and self-indulgent and kind of starts making everything about her. I guess at the end of the day, when I look at the thing that makes or breaks it for me and makes me a Moira girl is that at the end of the day, which one of these actresses really conveys to me that they're Laura's best friend and that they fucking truly love her and would do anything for her? It's Moira Kelly for me. For me, Donna's too concerned about James and other things, and I don't know. But yeah, there's an evolution there. Again, we're looking at 2 days with Fire Walk with Me versus the first couple weeks after her death, where of course there's a little bit of evolution, but I don't know, man, Donna goes through the steps of grieving pretty fucking quickly, you guys, in the series. I'm like, dang, she moved on fast, y'all. So there's all that. Anyway, I'm sure there are other controversies and things that I know there are that I will get to as I recount the movie play by play. Well, pretty much. All right, let's talk about Sheryl Lee, shall we? Let's do that. What can I say? She is just fucking, she was the perfect Laura Palmer. She fucking nailed it. And the whole thing, as I understand it, was kind of a happy accident where she was just cast as a teenage corpse, basically. I think that was the entire description. And I guess Lynch found her such a compelling corpse that from there, I know they added like the photographs and the picnic home movie with James and Donna. And he was like, yeah, and even created the role of Maddie Ferguson for her later, which I'm not gonna lie, I found pretty fucking cringy, but that's just me being toads honest with you. Um, Although the fucking murder of Maddie Ferguson is one of the most horrifying things to ever be seen on network television to this day. What is really network television? I'm not sure. I'm not really sure what that means. There's like the major networks, like not cable. Anyway, she was born in Bavaria, West Germany, Augsburg, to be specific, and then grew up in Boulder, Colorado. Who the fuck is she? John Denver? What is that? Then was lived all over the place, Pasadena, blah blah. Ended up in Seattle, which I actually didn't know for the longest time. Um, I wonder if we were even there during the same time. No idea. Yeah, so she was hired just to play a dead girl, and it evolved from there. She worked with Lynch a couple more times, playing Glinda the Good Witch in Wild at Heart, and then the prequel of Fire Walk with Me that we're talking about now. Oh, after the series, I guess that would be the third. Oh well, and did a little thing in Mulholland Drive. Her and Renette Polanski appear there, thus supporting the claim that Mulholland Drive takes place in the world of Twin Peaks. Or I've heard that flipped, but that doesn't make as much sense, does it really? Um, she's done a few things, not a whole lot, to be honest, that I am familiar with. I also forgot that she fucking totally dated David Duchovny, y'all. I like to imagine that he was in drag when they got it on. Yeah, she's done some great activism, mostly involving biodiversity, climate change awareness, renewable energy, Wild Earth Guardians. She's protested the Keystone XL. Wouldn't it be funny if actually she supported it? And I was like, no, why, Sheryl? It'd be another Catherine Deneuve moment. Anyway, she's, yeah, done good stuff. And when you look at her IMBD, I mean, I'm, I, has she maybe done more movies than Gina Davis? And yet I know none of these really, other the ones that, except this one. Notes from the Underground. I'm gonna make myself watch it again. She is very good in it, and I understand why they made some of the artistic decisions that they did. But they took her character, who is a minor character, so minor in the book, and yeah, artistic license, I guess. Notes from the Underground by Dostoevsky is one of my favorite books like of all time, and I guess I just felt like kind of a purist and that they took too many liberties, but I will rewatch it at some point and give it another chance. um and yeah, I have seen none of this other stuff. I remember hearing about, what was it called, the TV show that she had for a while, I don't remember, Dirty Sexy Money or something like that. Dirty Sexy Money, yeah, I never did see that. I feel like I heard good things, but I might be making that up. Uh, at any rate, that is Sheryl Lee, aka Laura Palmer. We love you, Laura. I actually celebrate Laura's death day. Well, I don't really celebrate it, but I hold like a I'll have a drink or raise a glass for her. At any rate, all right. I'm gonna stop this now. I see no point to continue. Fire Walk with Me. So I'm going to kind of do a scene by scene, and you'll see right away the difference between Fire at Walk with Me and the pilot, for example. It's night and fucking day. If you'll remember in the pilot, the whole thing opens with Josie Packard looking in that mirror. Her face is flawless. Her skin's porcelain. She has no pores. It's just an amazing, enviable kind of beauty that we're witnessing there. And then it goes straight to Pete Martell kissing Catherine, going out, and she's dead, wrapped in plastic there by the log. The first scene, and I'm trying to give a couple visual cues here because honestly, David's work is so, calling him David like we're good old buddies. My pal David, you see, his work is so visual. He's such a visual artist that it's hard to do some of this without having some visual cues. So in contrast, Fire Walk with Me opens on this TV set here, the static TV, which some people might not even be old enough to remember. This was pre-cable, y'all. And it's smashed. And you hear screaming and no, and then thuds, some pretty heavy thuds. And that's how that goes. And then, sorry, guys, I have 3 pages of notes here because I wanted to do this as close to scene by scene. I'm going to highlight some of the stuff. The next scene we have is Gordon Cole yelling, "Get me Agent Chet Desmond." That was not a bad impression. I'm not going to do it again, though. And then we get to Agent Chet Desmond, and he is on call. I thought I had a photo of it somewhere here. It's that school bus scene, y'all. What the fuck is happening in that scene? What girls are crying, and the bus is like toppled, and I don't know, but it also looks like they're being detained. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. And I don't see a picture, but y'all know what I mean. It's a brief scene. And he's told he has to go to Portland, Oregon. And then he's got a surprise for him, and they get there. And the surprise is one of the most interesting and kind of talked about things in Twin Peaks in Fire Walk with Me. He gets there and he meets Chester. Chester Desmond is, what's his fuck? Chris Isaac. Is that his name? Why am I forgetting his name all of a sudden? And the other guy there is, of course, Kiefer Sutherland. And so, hold on, I have to know. And so they go there, and it's not telling me it's this guy. Anyway, and so they go there, and they're greeted with this chick gets off the airport, and she's like walking in place. She's got one hand hidden. She's making a fist. She's got a sour expression. She's blinking. Her dress has been altered, and she's wearing a blue rose. And Kiefer's character is all like, Sam is all like, what the fuck was that? Not really, because he's far too innocent to use that kind of language. So here's what the breakdown of that was. She wore a sour face, meaning that they would have problems with local authorities, which immediately proves to be true. Both of her eyes blinking meant that they'd have trouble higher up. Also true. She had one hand in her pocket, meaning local authorities were hiding something. Yes, they are. A whole lot of fucking cocaine for one. Her other hand is in a fist. There's going to be local authorities are going to be belligerent. Yes, they are. She is walking in place, meaning there'd be a lot of legwork. She's her mother's sister's girl. Missing in that sentence was the word uncle, which means the uncle is probably behind bars, federal prison, I think they say. Her dress has been tailored or altered with different colored thread, and this is a code for drugs. And then there's the blue rose. And Chet Desmond says, I can't tell you about the blue rose. But we know about the blue rose now. Now we know the blue rose cases are the special kind of paranormal cases. This comes back up 25 years later in The Return. Again, another one of those brilliant tie-ins that we have there that I so love. The next thing we see is they go to Deer Meadow PD, and there's all these like weird jokes, and the secretary, they're laughing, but it's not clear. Chet Desmond does this little nose grab, forces his way on the one deputy, forces his way into the back. They are able to get Teresa Banks's possessions and access to her body to perform the autopsy, which leads to one of the most horrifying scenes that I still cannot watch, y'all. When Sam pulls back the fingernail to retrieve that little letter under there, I just can't. I lose it every time. Cannot watch it. And then they end up going they find out that she works at Hal's Diner, so they go there. And this is the first time we actually see, I thought I had it somewhere here. Yes, here it is. We see the woodsman kind of the one guy by the door here, and the other kind of gatekeeper. It's very Black Lodge. What we see this when David Bowie flashes back. We know also, we see it throughout the series, where we know from Mike with the one-armed man that they met at you call it convenience store. I tell you like it is. They meet above this gas station. The gas station or convenience store is played out through season 1, 2, and 3, The Return. But this looks like one of their meetings. And it is the only time we see the woodsman ever in the Twin Peaks, in the initial Twin Peaks world, season 1 and 2, or Fire Walk with Me. It was such an interesting thread for them to have picked up with The Return. The woodsmen, of course, become instrumental. They're obviously very, well, this isn't the only scene, sorry. We see them with David Bowie when he flashes back. But so we have 2 shots of instances of the woodsmen, or I'm calling them the woodsmen. I think that's what they're called. But they picked this up in The Return. We know that they're instrumental to the operations and the goings on of the Black Lodge. And they're also kind of in between agents who can, not really sure how many different realities or dimensions they can travel through, but they do come out and heal bad Cooper, the Cooper Doppler, when he's shot. And so which is also another really fucking beautiful scene. And he's shot by the dude, I can never remember his name, who gets him out of jail, or who he gets out of jail. Got the guy who's supposed to be working for him. But anyway, the woodsman, and then of course the infamous God of Light, and then we learn from this guy the second part of the Fire Walk with Me poem, which I will get to eventually, with the horse and the well. All right. And then after this, we go, and this is the Hal's Diner thing is lovely, because Irene, she tells us a little bit about about what she knew about Teresa Banks, suggesting she had a coke problem, asked them if they want any, want to hear about the specials, because they don't have any. Desmond is punking Sam at this point. It's getting late or early, as he might point out a couple of times. Sam says a couple times. They head over anyway after this. They find out that she was living at the Big Trout. And here is where we actually encounter the amazing Harry Dean Stanton, who I somehow did not pull a picture up of. I'm not sure how we do that. Yes, Harry Dean Stanton gives them a cup of good old morning, what does he call it? Good Morning America. And they have a weird encounter with him where this guy comes in. No, sorry, a guy doesn't come in. The old lady with the weird ice bag on her face, and she's asking about hot water, and then something changes in her. One aside again, fucking love Harry Dean Stanton. I was very saddened that he died, but man, he lived a long, full life, full of cigarettes, smoked till the fucking end of it all. Anyway, the lady comes in asking about hot water. There's something changes, and he says, you see, I've already gone places. I just want to stay here. And you kind of wonder, and you get this whole sense that there's just so much under the surface. Anyway, they check her trailer, realize that she had always worn this special ring that we know so much about. And sorry, I'm not doing a good job with the visual cues if you're watching this at all. Here's the lady that comes in, who people, I think, speculated was David Lynch in drag, and I don't know. I don't think so. And yeah, so anyway, they find out that she's missing the ring. Let me look for her. And so they go back to Deer Meadow, where they're filled with all kinds of, that was TP ring relief is not what I meant to type there. I was not watching. So they have to go deal with the attitudinal sheriff again, who is not very helpful. But at this point, what happens there with we got a phone who's got a little ring. That whole conversation happens. And then from there, things change. Now we are actually, If you're watching this, you're like, what are you typing? It's because I'm trying to do it with one hand. There's a fucking ring, and there's Teresa Banks wearing it. There you go. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Okay, so they go back to Deer Meadow, Attitude, and then it flashes back to, it goes to Philly. And we're back in time to Philly. And Kyle MacLachlan, Agent Cooper, has had this dream, this recurring dream that Philip Jeffries, who is, of course, David Bowie, is going to be there, and he's materializes out of nowhere here, thusly. and suddenly he's there, and he's ranting and he's raving, and he's not making a lot of sense, but a couple of things that he says, who do you think that is right there, pointing at Agent Cooper, which is interesting because this really has to be alluding at this point, it has to be referencing the very, very end of season 2, where, of course, the very last episode is directed by David Lynch, where the Cooper has gone into the Black Lodge and the evil Doppel Cooper emerges. He's in the bathroom, cracks his head on the sink, infamously cackling, "How's Annie? How's," that whole thing where he's like, "How's Annie?" So he knows somehow Bowie, Philip Jeffries, has been traveling around dimensions and or time spaces enough that he knows that might not be the real Cooper. Interesting, because that's another thread this was one of the questions when I talk about controversial. Okay, when I talk about controversial, this was one of the questions that people had, like, what was that nonsense with David Bowie? And it didn't make any sense, really, for 25 fucking years. And then in the return, of course, it's very pretty well explained, I think. We'll get to that eventually. The other thing I super forgot to mention, because I was so preoccupied looking for this picture, when they go back to before we go to jump to Philly, the scene with David Bowie in Philly, Agent Desmond goes back to the trailer park alone and finds the ring under the trailer on a mound of dirt, kind of like the one we see later with Laura Palmer. And then, sorry, having some technical issues here. And then he disappears into thin air, disappears. No idea what happens to him. He's just gone. And it's a weird scene jump to the Philly scene. All right. Then it flashed to a year later. It's very innocent. Laura and Donna are walking to school. Bobby and Mike are giving them a hard time. Stuff looks like normal school stuff. And then we get really into this whole thing with Bobby, I love Bobby Briggs. I have to say he's one of those guys that I feel like for like a while, when I was first introduced to this, I thought, this guy is my fucking alter ego. I've also said that about Danny Zuko in Grease. So yes, douchebag fuckboys are my male counterparts, apparently. I fucking love him in this, and I love him throughout the series. I will say this, Bobby Briggs and Shelley Johnson are the only couple I enjoy watching make out in all of Twin Peaks land, except I love Norma and Ed together, which really pays off in the return. Tearjerker every time. I love Bobby. I love Bobby and Shelley together. They're the only couple of all the fucking around that's going in this town. Bobby and Shelley are the only ones that convince me that they're really actually hot for each other. Anyway, Bobby is there. He's being like smirky, and they're trying to tell him that cops want to talk to him. He's like, "Here I am," and he's doing that weird walking backwards thing, and like just being a fucking smartass. And I love every second of it. Then shit gets real. What happens? Laura, some other stuff happens, but they get to this. It flashes to, hold on, let me get here. I really am failing at this. We get to this scene, which is another one of the most fucking beautiful scenes. And it's where they have they're having this conversation. Oh, that did nothing to, here's somebody else's blog I'm using just for the visuals here. But they're the mother is not there when they're having this conversation, but this is the layout, and they're, it's an aerial shot, and they're zooming in tight on their faces. It's super gorgeous. And they're having this conversation, and Donna asks, Laura, if you were falling in space, do you think you'd eventually slow down, or would you just keep going faster and faster? And Laura says, you'd go faster and faster until you burst into flames, and no one would come to save you, not even the angels, because there are no angels. And it's just gorgeous. I love that scene a whole bunch. It tells a lot about Laura, where she is already mentally and what she knows is happening. She can already see it, this inevitability before her. And it's heartbreaking, but very beautifully filmed. Then we go through, it's a couple other things happen. We flash to we meet Cooper, says he knows it's happening again. He's describing the next victim. And she's now preparing a large abundance of food. She's flashed to Sheryl Lee or Laura Palmer. She's doing the Meals on Wheels. When suddenly this, Mrs. Tremont and her nephew come up. Here's Mrs. Tremont. And the nephew's wearing a mask, and they offer her this picture, which I want more than anything in the fucking world. Will somebody make this for me, please? And the nephew starts whispering, the man behind the mask. He knows, he's looking for the book with the pages torn out. He's under the fan now. And she knows exactly who he's talking about. So she runs back home, ditching out on the Meals and Wheels, much to Shelley Johnson's relief, because she's stupid. Her fucking, Laura's boyfriend, her and Bobby, the whole thing. So she's like, okay, she runs off. She goes home. And who does she find in her bedroom? It's not fully revealed. It is a partial reveal at this point. Of course, we know anyway that it's the father. If you have seen the series, I just want to make a side note here. I had not seen the series. I actually watched Fire Walk with Me first when I was in a very precarious position. I was very sick when I was watching this movie and vomiting and couldn't stop vomit. Like there's in the train car scene at the end, while she is being brutally murdered, on her hands and knees. I was on my hands and knees staring at the television, vomiting, unable to take my eyes off the television. And for a movie to get, again, that visceral of a response from me is something else. Anyway, so she runs out. This is another one of those acting scenes. It's this one here where she's gasping and crying and coughing, that she's crying so hard she's coughing and she can't breathe, and she's like, no, it can't be, but it is. It's her fucking dad. He's the one. So she runs over to Howard's, and this is the only appearance he makes in Fire Walk with Me, I believe. She runs over to Howard, the shut-in's house, and she or does she go to Donna's first? Hold on, let me see what I wrote down. But anyway, she goes to him. She's like, he knows me. That's not quite yet. Hold on, I'm looking at my notes. Before that, though, I have first, she sees the man behind the mask. No, Donna. Oh, then she runs to Donna's first, actually. And this is another really touching scene where she's just crying her eyes out. And she asks Donna, are you my best friend? And she said, of course I am. I love you always. I love you always. And then we have this whole psycho scene with the father, this one here, where she walks in and he's like, sit down. And he's sitting at the table. So she sits down, and then no sooner does she sit down than he's like, did you wash your hands? And I'm like, bitch, you just told her to sit down. When the fuck did she have time to wash her hand? When did she have time to wash her hands? So he goes over, he's being creepy as fuck with her, pinching her face, looking, who gave you this locket? The best friend's heart locket that she's wearing half of, because James had the other half. Yeah. he's, yeah, did you get this from your lover? Go wash your hands right now. I see dirt way under the fingernail. It's all together one of the creepiest. You're like, fuck, dude. That's rough. That's really rough. Then she goes, at some point in here, she does, I must have forgotten to write it down, but she does go over to Howard's house, gives him, shows him the book, says the pages are ripped out. It's him, it's Bob. I know. He's like, Bob's not real. She's like, he's real. He's been raping me since I was 11. And he's like, oh my God. And she's like, she does that transformation where she's all, fire, walk with me. And then she's terrified and he's trying to console her. But this is how he comes into possession of the secret diary with the pages torn out. She gives it to him for safekeeping because he doesn't know you. He doesn't even know about you. It'll be safe here. And she leaves telling him, I don't even know if I'll be back. Anyway, all right, then we skip forward to, so then she goes back that night. She has this dream. And yeah, this is with Annie Blackburn. And because she goes out, she remembers that she has left the picture that Mrs. Tremont gave her outside. So she goes back, puts it on her wall, and immediately has this fucking crazy dream where Annie Blackburn shows up. And Annie Blackburn, who was Cooper's love interest, of course, through most of season 2. And I thought I had it here somewhere, but I guess but basically Annie says, hey, I've been with Laura and Dale. The good Dale is trapped in the lodge and can't get out. Write it in your diary, which she does, even though she doesn't understand this cryptic message from this bloody woman who just appears in her bed. And yeah, that whole thing, but she does end up finding the ring under her bed the next day in real life. So, all right, then we skip ahead to a scene where Bobby is calling Jacques at the roadhouse because Jacques, man, I need some things. He's like, yeah, Bobby, baby, how come you only call me when you need something? All right, so he arranges a deal with this guy who, if you're paying attention, is the deputy who Chet Desmond grabbed his nose and like kind of humiliated him. He's there to deal them coke. That happens in a bit. But yes, so are drugs involved? Are the local law enforcement hiding something? Fuck yes. And it pretty much ends there with like, you know, Laura's at home here thusly, and she's getting ready to go out, and Donna's all like, aren't you going to make me a drink? And she's like, the nighttime is my time. Donna's like, let me come with you. So she tags along, follows Laura to the Bang Bang Bar, the here, yeah, the Roadhouse, obviously. And before the Roadhouse, before she enters, she has this meaningful encounter. This is the only appearance I think that the log lady makes as well, that she has this encounter with the log lady here. I do have. And the log lady puts her hand on Laura's forehead and she says, when this kind of fire starts, it's very hard to put out. The tender boughs of innocence burn first, and the wind rises, and then all goodness is in jeopardy. And Laura is so touched, it moves her to tears. That's just a very meaningful moment. But she goes into the bar nonetheless, and you know, Jacques there with a couple dudes who are looking to get lucky, looks over at Laura. Laura's like, sure. Okay, really quickly before I go on from the Roadhouse to the rest of what happens that night, I did say that Laura finds, when she has a dream about Annie Blackburn, she finds the ring under her bed the next day, but that's not true. She has it and then it disappears, which is an important point because in the dream, Cooper tells her, the dream that they share, Cooper tells her not to take the ring, which kind of contradicts something that happens later. I will get to that. But so, okay, so they're at the Roadhouse. Laura realizes that she can't shake Donna. Donna is not going anywhere. And they're getting ready to go across the border to the infamous Pink Room, which if this shit doesn't get stuck in your head for days after you watch this, you're not watching it the right way.
Let's go.
I could honestly play this forever. This goes on. This is one of the best scenes in the entire fucking movie. I love it. I love the lighting, the red and blue, the whole thing. They do a lot of drugs. It's, you know, a lot of things happen here in this one. In this, we learn. It all convinced. Sorry. So this is infamous things. Jacques says the infamous "I am as blank as a fart," and and it's also the scene where we get Chug-a-Lug-Donna. She ends up running into Renette Polanski. When was the last time we were together? Oh, I know, One-Eyed Jacks. And they're reminiscing, and they're just high as fuck. They're who knows what they're on, and they realize. One thing that happens here is they realize that Teresa Banks, it has been a year since her death, and that Jacques says, yeah, she was asking me what your father's looked like. Turns out she was asking what your father's looked like because she was going to try to blackmail Leland, which is why he ended up, Bob, which is why he ended up bashing her brains in. We also have here, this is where they make the arrangement to meet up at the cabin, my little potty twins, you know, put some meat in that sandwich. So this is where they make that arrangement. After this, at some point, there is also the scene where her and Bobby go out into the woods to score that cocaine. And I mention it only because there is one hysterical part where after Bobby accidentally shoots the cop, who's there to sell him cocaine, apparently, he's trying to bury him by throwing handfuls of dirt on his corpse. And he and Laura are very cute. She's wasted and annoying him anyway. And then, but I'm not going to talk about that too much more. Then the next, really, the thing of significance that happens is they're in the car together, Leland and Laura, and that's when they have this encounter with the one-armed man who is screaming at her, showing him the ring. It's your father. It's your father. He is lost in thought. Leland is. He's just like, what the fuck is going on? Because he's reminiscing about the time that he was with Teresa Banks, asked her to bring a couple of friends so they could party together. But one of those friends, turns out, was his daughter, so he chickened out. He's clearly losing it. Things are clearly coming to a head. Either that night or the next night, we have this very creepy, who are you? Who are you? Really scene where Leland drugs Sarah with heroin. We see the horse, the whole thing. Turns on the fan. We know bad shit's gonna happen. Climbs in the window, starts raping her, and as he's raping her, he transforms, and she can see clearly that it's him. It's her father, just like the guy had told her. So after this point, also, I just want to say, I really could just talk about the pink room enough, which I don't even know how we know that it's called the pink room, but it is. It's super gorgeous. But anyway, pretty much the next scene of importance is Laura decides that, it's the night that she's supposed to meet Jacques and Renette and Leo at the cabin, but she meets James Hurley first. They have that motorcycle ride together. Then she has that whole scene in the woods, which later we see from a different perspective in The Return, where she suddenly screams into the forest. And in The Return, it's because Kyle MacLachlan is there. Why it happens originally in Twin Peaks. At this point, we have no idea, just that she's fucking losing it. Again, spiraling out. Things are coming to a head. Moira Kelly is very lovely. I'm just going to say right here if you're watching the screen. Anyway, and I think the most beautiful scene in the world, in any of the Twin Peaks universe, is coming up here. So I'm going to point it out to you. It's probably this next one. Not quite. So we she has this whole intense conversation with James, and it's just when she like hugs him and screams into his ear, "I love you, James!" And she does love him as much as she can. She just doesn't want anyone to love her. Then this is at, by the way, 21st and Sparkwood. This is where she jumps off the bike. She runs into the forest. She goes into the meet Leo, Jacques, and Ronette, and it's the beginning of the end. They take her to the cabin. The father, Leland, of course, is following. They're there. They're consuming tons of drugs. It's they're obviously, clearly very high. And why not just leave it here? And because the scene is coming up. And yeah, the father's watching everything through the window. So when Jacques goes outside, Leland brains him with a bottle, doesn't kill him, but leaves him incapacitated. Leo sees it, takes off. Laura's like, "Can you untie me? Can you untie me?" But no, he doesn't. He takes off. He's like, "Shut up." Then Leland, he takes off, and Leland comes in. And this is where he takes them, to the train car, which is horrifying. The whole scene, I had a good picture of it a second ago. The whole scene is terrifying because he's racing them to the train car. They're both tied. Here it is. They're both hysterical, and he's going to kill them both. Or Bob is, depending on how you look at that. So we see this happening, and also at the same time, this is about the part where I got on my knees and knew that I was gonna vomit. But yeah, this is so. One arm Mike is also chasing them because he's trying to intervene. He's trying to he's trying to stop Bob, basically. Bob Leland beats the crap out of Ronette. And here's the other thing. So Ronette is here. She's tied. She's in the corner. And she's praying. She's just fucking praying with all of her little heart. She's praying. And he looks up, and this angel, and I told you there was some controversy about the imagery of the angel. I am going to get into it. The angel is there, and suddenly her hands are untied. And so she manages to get out of the train car. But, oh no, she doesn't. Well, actually, Leland beats her over the head and throws her out. And while the doors open, the one-armed man, at some point in there, I don't distinctly remember this, but what it says, I kind of do, I kind of don't, but I think I'm so focused on, oh, here we go. Hold on. I just really want you guys to see this one, because it is, I forget the director of photography, the DP's name. I can't remember this scene right here. He's got it on his reel, like on his resume. And I'm telling you, as a director, I wouldn't have to see much more than this to be like, hey, dude, you're hired. Anyway, it says here on the page that Laura asks if Leland is going to kill her, and he transforms into Bob. He tells her that he intends to possess her. Bob beats Ronette unconscious. Mike, who tracked the Bob-possessed Leland to the train, rescues Ronette, which he doesn't really rescue her. He's just kind of like, oh, well, all right. I don't know. And then he throws Teresa's ring into the train car. I do remember it suddenly like ding 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 on the train car floor, but I don't have a distinct visual memory of him throwing it in there. At any rate, she puts it on. It says here she puts it on, which prevents Bob from possessing her. But if that's the case, if the ring prevents Bob from possessing her, why does Cooper tell her not to take the ring in the dream? Furthermore, it seems like the ring, watching the return, it seems very distinctly that we don't need to see this, that the ring takes you to the Black Lodge. Like everybody in the return who puts on the ring ends up in the Black Lodge. So there's still a little bit of confusion there for me. If it protects her from being possessed, maybe the only way to protect her from being possessed is to send her to the Black Lodge, which kind of seems like a fate worse than death. And she is physically killed on top of everything. So I don't really know. That's a question that I have still, is about exactly what role the ring plays. We know that everybody who wears it dies, and everybody who puts it on ends up in the Black Lodge, except what about Teresa Banks? And how is she the first? Is she the first person? She seems to have been the first person who had it. So there is a little, I'm not too sure about that. But anyway, getting back to this train car thing and the imagery of, it's really horrifying, of the angel. Of course, the angel appears, only Renette is freed. Laura is murdered. He wraps her in plastic, carries her away, puts her in the river. And then he goes into the Black Lodge himself, where Bob and Mike, the arm, demand back their garbanbosia. I think it's their pain and suffering. Apparently all the pain and suffering that Leland, the vessel, has accrued while in his human form, they want that back. They want that pain and suffering. That's Black Lodge material, apparently. And so, yes, Laura dies, and then she's in the fucking red room with Cooper, and the angel appears once more, and she begins crying and laughing. Let's talk about this angel for a minute, though. This picture, the reason why I don't think it's the cheesiest thing in the world is because this, okay, stick with me for 1 second. This is her childhood home. So that has probably been her bedroom ever since she was a child, right? So with that said, this picture, when I look at it, it looks to me very childish, meaning, why do I click on these things? They don't bring up the picture any clearer than it's like, oh yeah, same picture, just as small. Meaning that has this angel picture was probably, I'm sure her room over the years as she aged had renovations, you know, so grew up age appropriate. That picture to me looks like a relic from her childhood that just stayed through said renovations, presumably. Also, it is opposite of her bed. So while Leland was raping her, remembering that this started when she was 11, she necessarily would have had that painting in her eyesight. It would have been in her like line of vision. And I can only imagine how many times as she was being raped by her father, she looked at that wondering why the angel wasn't coming to save her. And it's, you know, there are no angels. At some point in the movie, the angel does disappear. There's no angels. No one's coming. No one is there to fucking save you. And when I think about it that way, and I think about the angel coming at the end, that final moment of finally being at peace with it. It's over. It's finally over. And while the image itself is kind of cheesy, I mean, did Lynch put that much thought into it? I don't know. On one hand, possibly, yes, he is that fucking detail oriented. We've all heard stories about how he'll stop to repaint a wall or make a lamp, or, you know, he does these things. But he's also very visual. And because Sheryl Lee had also just done Wild at Heart, where she played Glinda the Good Witch, and was suspended in a similar fashion, like aesthetically, not too different. He might have just been fond of that image and worked backwards from there. It is a little bit cheesy, but I can't fault him for it. I'm just going to say, I find, say, Dougie in The Return far more egregious than I do the use of this imagery, although it's trite, you know, religious imagery, but just thinking again from the child's mind, remembering that she was young and that the angel did there was no one there to save her. That's just the best way I could put it. Oh my goodness. Well, we did it. We got all the way through the movie. That took a really long time. But yeah, there's just so many, as I was going through, course, glossed over a couple scenes I had to, but there are so many bizarre magical moments in the movie. It's such a surreal mind fuck. And there are so many things like, that I just, about the ring and the dream and the picture and the fucking pink room and the log lady. There's so many instances of magic. I felt like I kind of had to do her up good. All right, but I am going to stop talking about Fire Walk with Me now. All right, so let's start talking about the magic of Fire Walk with Me. Now, here I'm going to expand a little bit and say that I'm looking really at the world of Twin Peaks at large, at least season one and season two predominantly. Throughout, from the season one through the return, there are tons of different kinds of magic, which is super exciting because it means easily be able to talk about multiple episodes and aspects of the series. So that is super thrilling news. But if you're thinking about it, really, I'm going to focus on one thing in particular. The obvious thing with season one and with Fire Walk with Me is Bob. What the fuck is Bob? Who the fuck is Bob? What? Why? Why is he so creepy? He haunts my nightmares. He haunts my dreams sometimes, really. So I'm not going to make us look at him for too long. Who? Like a PTSD from Bob. Anyway, if you're like me and you've watched season one and two dozens of times throughout the last 20 some years, then you kind of at some point, of course, at the beginning, you're like, what the fuck is Bob? And theories abound. But if you want to take it at face value, to be honest, in the series, they kind of come to the conclusion that Bob is just the evil that men do. And that's rough, but kind of sorry about that. Kind of makes sense. But let's not forget, Bob is magic. He is related to magic. We can't forget the first part of this this chant here. The second half is clearly just from the return, but the first one we hear all throughout the series. I mean, numerous times. Through the darkness of future past, the magician longs to see one chance out between two worlds. Fire, walk with me. Ooh, did you get chills? I did. Titillating. Right. So, but this begs a question. Who is the magician? So if you remember the pilot, the international episode, rendition episode, what am I trying to say? Version of it, which granted they had to kind of just slap on an ending, but in that one, it almost seemed like Bob were a corporeal person who was doing some kind of like almost satanic looking ritual, maybe a witch or a magician. However, Bob has no corporeal form. He is more of a inhabiting spirit, right? So that really gives me two strong possible theories about really what Bob is. The first one I'm going to put out there is this idea of a familiar. Now, in this case, we can still flip it. What if Leland is the witch? What if Leland is the magician and Bob is his familiar? Does that seem a little bit odd? Maybe because probably when you think of familiar at first, you think of the archetypical, like the witch with the black cat. And witches, hello, how many of us have black cats or have had black cats? Like, we do have an affinity for such. At any rate, when I was first looking at this and thinking about it and thinking, yeah, it's kind of close because, a familiar, like just, I don't know, traditionally a familiar would be basically a animal or a person who the main purpose of the familiar was to serve the witch or young witch, providing protection of some kind as they came into their new powers. It could be, think of Bob as protecting Leland as he came into his full powers. Or maybe Leland is protecting Bob. That's more of a stretch for me. But let's think about this a little more. There are some other definitions of familiar, and this is where it's going to get really fun and interesting. But just really quickly, uh, you know, uh, I just want to say familiars have been thought of as both benevolent and malevolent, depending on the perspective. So they could be categorized as demons or fairies. And I like that. I like to walk that line myself. With that said, here's what I guess my favorite definition, which really turned the idea on its head for me and made me think, actually, this is completely applicable to Twin Peaks and the Bob situation. So I'm going to read this right here. This is from actually Pierre Riffard. And if you're wondering who he is, well, I will tell you right now by hovering right here. He is a French philosopher and specialized in esotericism. So he was born in France. He was a professor of pedagogy and philosophy, and seems like a very learned fellow. He defined a familiar or a familiar spirit as such: alter ego, doppelganger, personal demon, personal totem, spirit companion. Good, you're still with me. Is the alter ego of an individual. It does not look like the individual concerned, even though it may have an independent life of its own, Dougie. It remains closely linked to the individual. The familiar spirit can be an animal companion, and if we add humans, check, we are in business here for a little Bob action, or a little, well, I went further than that, as you can see, with Into the Black Lodge and Into the Return, but think about it for a second. Here, I'm going to give you a little bit more in that vein, if you will. Actually, right now, so I'm going to skip this for now. There are some other interesting points here, but to keep in the same vein before it rolls away, I'm going to go down here to this is the familiar's relationship with sorcerers, magicians and such. So the first point, they say there was some question about how a person first met their familiar. And the British accounts in the early modern period, they say there are 3 types of encounters which relate to a witch or cunning person meeting the spirit first time spontaneously, usually while they were just going about their daily activities. Now, remember from the series, Leland first met Bob when he was at his grandparents' home. I think it was his grandparents or maybe his parents, Pearl Lakes. And Bob was the next door neighbor 2 houses over, right? And he met him outside because he was flicking matches at him. So that kind of checks out. The second point, which is interesting, is that it says the familiar spirit commonly appeared to magical practitioners. They would be they would be like transferred to a person by a pre-existing individual who was sometimes a family member. Now, this gets really interesting when we get into the return, and we know that that Laura is the one, and Sarah, girl, she got a little something going on there too. So this is really interesting. That's really 2 out of 3. The last one just says that the first time the witch encounters their familiar, they're usually going through a really difficult time, maybe financial hardship or some other kind of, something really heavy. But we don't know. With Bob specifically, Leland was allegedly a kid when he met him. I don't even know how old, and so we have no insight into what's going on in Leland's life at that point. With that said, I find it very fascinating. They do, and I'll slide back up here real quick to these other definitions. They're all interesting. One talks about a medicine man. This one talks also about shamanism. So it is pretty cool. I would go back and read it if I were you or interested. They do break down into 3 types of familiars, which is the first one would be familiar spirits manifesting as humans and humanoids throughout Western Europe, divinatory spirits, manifesting as animals, or malevolent spirits manifesting as animals. Um, so that's just, I don't know, a nice little aside. So here you can see that the idea of familiars even made it into the Salem witch trials. So it was a pretty commonly accepted idea, from the inception of, well, demonizing witchcraft, I guess. I don't know. Well, don't get me going about those Christians again. Anyway, yeah, it's a thing. But so during the Salem witch trials, actually, some of these association with familiar spirits was actually used to convict some suspected witches. Sarah Good, for example, was said to have a yellow bird who sucked between her fingers. Anne Putnam, in particular, was supposed to have frequently seen the yellow bird in her afflictions. Tituba was said to have seen strange animals that urged her to hurt children, which include that's just, you just don't like children, it's okay, which included a dog, a hog, a black dog, a red cat, and a black cat. I have never seen a red cat, but I would love to. Maybe they meant orange, I don't know. But at any rate, yeah, it was this idea of familiars has made it into folk tales. We have a brief historiography of it, and even some popular culture, as the kids like to call it, mentions here quite a few. So the idea of the whole concept of familiars is pretty old. I mean, the roots of it are pretty deep, and it's pretty widely spread. The roots of that spread pretty far. So I think it's actually a really good contender for their relationship. For example, this idea of having the alter ego or the doppelganger, a personal demon. I don't know, man. I think if Bob could, in this sense, be Leland's alter ego, or Leland could be Bob's just as easily. I mean, it kind of opens up a whole chicken and the egg, which came first, which is funny since I have Aristotle up here anyway. But yeah, I don't know which way that would go. Sorry, that last one got cut off a little bit abruptly, but I was done talking anyway. And now I'm ready to get into the second idea about Bob. Bob. So creepy. So good at being creepy. He really is. The second idea about Bob is that really it's just straight up spirit possession, that Bob is maybe the cumulative energy, the evil that men do, the cumulative energy of that somehow manifested in the darkness of those woods, somehow also relevant to the Black Lodge, though. So there's a connection there to the Black Lodge, and we're actually not even talking about the Black Lodge in this episode. That is forthcoming, I promise. But yeah, so Bob could just be a fucking really malevolent force who looks for vulnerable people who will let him inside, as Leland did as a child. And, he has other people like Laura who he wants to control, but she'd rather die than give him control. I'd rather die than give you control. Okay, nope. Total Nine Inch Nails moment there. Anyway, yeah, so spirit possession is a really likely candidate. There are so many, I mean, there's way more than just, I know we did shamanism and spirit possession last time. I've also talked about it within the context of Christianity, which is kind of the first place my mind goes, is to like an exorcist place with the priest and the whole fucking thing. But also it's far more reaching than that. The Egyptians, I'm just going to actually read a couple of highlights, because look at how many instances over the world we have through Asia, and through Abrahamic traditions, shamanism, Wiccan, the whole thing, or Wicca, sorry, the whole thing. So I'm just going to read a few highlights to give you an idea of how diverse the idea or the concept of spirit possession or inhabiting spirits really is. In Egypt, for example, they believe that if an animal is separated from his body by violence, or a person, it doesn't go far. It remains there, kind of haunting it, which that's something I feel like I have totally felt. I'm totally willing to believe that. They also go on, in this passage, sorry, they go on to talk about eating the flesh and the organs of the dead to accrue their knowledge and wisdom, which is, by the way, this is from the apparitions of spirits and on vampires or revenants. So I also made this connection with vampirism and the ancient Egyptians and the cannibalism and everything. It's definitely interesting. And I kind of wonder why it's so, I don't know, cannibalism in that very ceremonial sense really does make sense. Well, also makes sense in rather than just fucking starving in the mountains somewhere too. Y'all have to know, if you're with me and some shit like that goes down, I will eat you. I'm going to survive. So it goes through, we have some other instances here going through Central Africa into Ethiopia. This Ethiopian story is really interesting, but I'm not going to read the whole thing. We go down into Kenya here, and this is kind of funny. The Shaitani, I'm going to say, they're the evil spirits that usually possess only women, and they demand luxury items, y'all. They demand some luxury items. And so men sometimes accuse women of faking possessions in order to get luxury items. Still, they pay up. They're not willing to take that chance. So go Kenya. Also, we go through, what was the other one that I wanted to pull out? Mozambique. This is an interesting one. These spirits are called Gamba, and they're said to be identified as dead soldiers and allegedly overwhelmingly possess women. Prior to the war, spirit possession was limited to families and was less common. But then the second instance of soldiers here in Uganda, there was a woman reportedly possessed by the spirit of a male Italian soldier, and she ultimately led a failed insurrection against governmental forces. But man, go Uganda. And then also, what was the other one that I thought was really cool? Oh, down here, there's a lot of shit about women. It's a lot about women. A couple more. South Africa. There was this one, the possession, I don't know I'm going to pronounce it X with a Z. The Zesbi and a Xhosa speaking people from South Africa. Most of them possessed are married women, and the condition of spirit possession among them is called Inwatso. They develop a special calling to divine the future, and they're actually really treated with a lot of respect. So that's cool. Going through Haitian voodoo, of course, there's a correlation between possession and voodoo. We've touched on that in previous episodes, even with Marie Laveau. And then let's see. In this one, I thought it was interesting too that the practitioner has no recollection of the possession, and in fact, when the possessing spirit leaves their body, the possessed one is tired and wonders what has been happening, which would be kind of a Leland thing. Again, he seems to not fully be aware, like he's not there, and and when he pulls that ripcord, when Bob pulls that ripcord and Leland remembers, he wakes up. So there's that. It goes through Buddhism. There's a passage in Tantric Buddhism about a person having a seizure, being possessed by different animals. Also here, there are some Taoism, Korean shamanism, Shinto. There are a lot of ideas about shamans, being able to channel supernatural powers, and being able to, again, kind of exorcise spirits, evil spirits. And oh my gosh, all through that. This one's interesting. Here are the last, these two are interesting here. The Tamil were down in South Asia. So the Tamil women in India are said to experience possession by Peye spirits. According to this tradition, these spirits overwhelmingly possess new brides, and they're usually identified as ghosts of young men who died while romantically or sexually frustrated and are ritually exorcised. They just fuck it out of them. Like let them go to town until they're spent. Just like fuck it away, boys. Sri Lanka also, there's a group of Tamil speaking people. They are possessed people. They speak a dialect of Tamil, and mixed also with Veda language. Here we go. Here's my favorite, Indonesia, right here. There's a voluntary, an induction of voluntary possession in Bali, and they're very, this is where the they're there. It's a cleansing purpose, a cleansing ritual, kind of like an exorcism, but also just a big cleansing. But I think it's Sulawesi. I don't know how to pronounce it, but Sulawesi, they practice a possession ritual, which they smother glowing embers with their bare feet. So this is where we get walking on the coals too. So you can see like all these weird things kind of like tie into, they've been, greatly altered over the years, but you can still see the remnants of like, women are feared and have been since the beginning of the beginning of fucking time. Most of this is about women, and so all these modern day rituals that you could go on like a company retreat and walk the coals like they do in the office is like really has a weird tie-in to spirit possession, in particular that possession of women. Anyway, and in Malaysia, these are the ones that I was trying to get to that whole time. Female workers in Malaysian factories have allegedly become possessed by spirits, and factory owners generally regarded as mass hysteria. But check this out. Ahwa Ong, Aihwa Ong, I really don't know how to say that. Aihwa Ong noted that spirit possession beliefs in Malaysia were typically held by older married women, whereas the female factory workers are typically young and unmarried. She connects this to the rapid industrialization and modernization of Malaysia. Ong argued that spirit possession is a traditional way of rebelling against authority without punishment, and suggests that it is a means of protesting the untenable working conditions and sexual harassment that the women were compelled to endure. Yes, Malaysia with the feminist angle. I love it. Anyway, I feel like there's also the spirit disco is the last one I wanted to mention here. There's a group possession known as spirit disco, which is much cooler than it sounds, because it's really just a bunch of women in church dancing and jumping around while they sing Christian songs, which really, I don't know. This doesn't sound that awesome. But yeah, and also going all through monotheistic religions, not just Christianity, but also in Islam, we have the idea of the jinn. We have, they possess humans. They're not necessarily harmful, though they can actually be helpful in some cases. And then in Judaism, of course, we have the idea of I think it's dibuk. I think that's how you say it. Again, mention of shamanism and possession, Wicca. Possession here used in a different terms. They believe that they can be voluntarily possessed by the goddess, connected with the sacred ceremony of drawing down the moon. And then, of course, in cultural anthropology, women are more likely to be involved in spirit possession than men. And I think it goes to that last point of women fucking trying to get some fucking power in a world that is corrupt, and power is not usually theirs for the taking, as it's wielded by the patriarchy, and fuck the patriarchy yet again. So It's interesting because we've learned a lot over the past 25 years or so. We've learned a lot about Bob and the nature of Bob and his origin story, his cosmogony, if you will, which is so beautifully illustrated in episode 8 of The Return. Mwah, that is a fucking work of art. It's a fucking masterpiece visually and otherwise. Yeah, we've learned a lot about, so if, you know, the nature of Bob and his cosmogony story, if you're taking episode 8 of The Return seriously, it's that he was born with the atomic bomb, which still kind of jibes with the whole, he's the evil that men do. He's the culmination of ill intent. He's also in some ways more in the series than in Fire Walk With Me, but in the first 2 seasons, the original run, he's also kind of a manifestation of this dark, foreboding, nay, ominous force that has always lived in these old woods, you know, and we've always been here to fight it. Is that the Bookhouse Boy thing, or is it this way? I'm clearly not a member. And so he's this commingling of natural forces and the kind of evil inherent to man and mankind, and the battle between maybe humankind and nature, or the commingling of all of the darkest aspects of both. I don't know. The mission of Fire Walk With Me obviously is Laura's discovery of who Bob is, but in a very literal sense, realizing that she's been raped by her father since she was 11. And that's a really hard part of the whole Twin Peaks universe that sometimes actually kind of gets lost in the other more supernatural elements of it, interestingly, or maybe because it's just really fucking hard to look at. At any rate, looking at possession and at the idea of Bob being a familiar, or perhaps Leland being Bob's familiar, if we look at Twin Peaks now in its totality with what we've learned from the secret history of Twin Peaks and the missing pieces and The Return. Did I say The Return twice? Now looking at the full history of Twin Peaks with The Return, the secret history, the missing pieces, all the things that we've now we've been able to gather a lot of information about tulpas and doppelcoopers and, you know, evils or Dougies or either way, and, you know, and the goings on of the woodsmen, and who play a very small role in Fire Walk With Me, but they are there. It was a really beautiful tie-in. Can we still go with possession? Yeah, we still could. I mean, I don't know. We could still go with the familiar theory too. They both still work even within the larger, more nuanced framework that we now have. Really, the more, you know, the Return and these other missing pieces, I don't think it diminished the idea that it might just be straightforward possession or a familiar situation. But we can definitely see that it's more nuanced than that, and that it's just a multifaceted, rich world of magic. Now, I mentioned tulpas a couple times and the doppelcoopers and all of this stuff. We are getting there, I promise, just not yet. This one was just to look at Fire Walk With Me and really to tell Laura's story and to tell you what I think about it, because I had opinions, y'all, and you had to listen to my opinions, or you checked out halfway and, you know, you're like, fuck this. This lady doesn't know what she's talking about. In either case, or at any rate, that was a lot. I got it done more quickly than I thought it was going to. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I did the whole Lynch thing justice. He is such an enigmatic, brilliant genius that it's really hard to make guesses, because some of these things I don't even know if he knows. And I think that a lot of the storytelling and putting together the missing pieces and these beautiful tie-ins, like with the woodsman who we see in Fire Walk With Me, and then wonder what the fuck was that all about anyway, until 25 years later when we see The Return. I think a lot of that structure might have been Mark Frost, and that's why they partner so well together. They really do partner well together. Anyway, but that's all from me for now. I'm gonna shut on up and let you guys go. Thank you for joining me. You've been down with me, Anarchy. And please do just stay witchy.